Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you, Gara, for such a warm welcome. My name is Ray Deiotte, and I'm the Chief Data Officer for Global Healthcare and Life Sciences at NetApp. Amelia, first of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here this morning, a pleasure to start off this amazing conference, an amazing lineup that you've put together. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the power of data translation, and I'm going to take you on a little bit of a circuitous journey around digital transformation and what data translation and really translation in general means to organizations today. With that, I've got a handful of slides and we're going to walk through them real quick. So digital transformation is affecting everybody at this point, right? And it's not just a change in translation, a change in technology, but it's a reformation of culture and processes as well. And as organizations are moving to be more data-driven and to push into a place where every decision is powered by data, there's a portion of the organization that tends to be missing, and that's the translator. That's someone who can link projects to business initiatives, to strategies, and to achieving enterprise transformation. Without these people, I think everyone here could agree that it's hard to move from projects around data science and AI and ML into enterprise portfolios that are really helping drive that transformation towards being data-driven. So with that, let's start. What does digital transformation mean to most organizations? It enables worker productivity through tools and tooling. 49% say that there's an ability to better manage business performance through data availability. And 46% think that digital transformation is going to help better meet customer experience expectations. At the end of the day, though, what digital transformation really means is making better decisions faster. When it comes to digital transformation, the challenges of transformation are real. From the platform to the silos to the lack of expertise, every organization has been struggling with digital transformation, especially if it's not a top-down, executive-led initiative. But why? Why is it so hard? And honestly, from my experience, it stems from a lack of understanding and transparency across lines of business. From IT to finance to HR and so on, there's silos of operations and execution that obfuscate reality from the organization. And there's a low level of knowledge that helps inform decisions, drive initiatives, and see holistically that supports that transformation. Anecdotally, I've seen tons of organizations that have struggled to understand why transformation is necessary and to understand why things need to be done that seem to have no business value. And without the role of the translator, you see IT, you see digital transformation become a cost center and not a partner and not a lead of the organization and a philosophical mindset that drives the entire organization. When we talk about innovation and driving the digital platform, technologists simply don't understand necessarily the business needs, and the business doesn't understand the difficulty or the reality of their requests. There's a disconnect in the dialogue between the business and the technologists when it comes to innovation and driving that digital platform. Throughout the organization, there are outdated KPIs. There's a lack of alignment between initiatives and strategic vision, and it's missing. It's hard to pull out good metrics and measures that indicate how much transformation is being done or is helping. And part of this stems from not instrumenting the organization the way it should be, but also not understanding what goals and outcomes we're trying to achieve from the highest levels to the lowest. There's silos everywhere. Anyone in this room today who deals with data science, who deals with data, who deals with analytics, who deals with organizational culture knows that there are silos everywhere. And because cooperation isn't done well and communication is at an all-time low, there are too many ways for this to break. Too many ways for digital transformation to fall off the books. And there's too many specialists running in each silo without a set of generalists who can see the forest for the trees and put together a good enterprise architecture. When it comes to tactical plans, putting together a roadmap is great. But if you haven't aligned it as an enterprise and understood what the capabilities that are being brought from a technology perspective to the processes that are being changed from a people perspective to the culture around transformation, those roadmaps are going to be fragmented. And they're going to exist only in the silos that already exist in an organization. And they may never coalesce into the transformation and value that leadership expects from digital transformation. And at the end of the day, there's limited expertise. I think we've all seen this. We've all seen the dire need for data engineers and analysts and ML and MR experts throughout the world as we're trying to recruit, as we're trying to expand, as we're trying to expose. But there's also a severe lack of expertise when it comes to the broad generalist regime. There are fewer people who can encapsulate an enterprise vision and architecture and relate it to business value. So when we talk about digital transformation, what does it take to transform? And there's a lot of pieces to this that all make it link directly to the data scientist at the core of the organization, right? But it's an IT paradigm shift. It's pulling in together data marts. It's pulling together data warehouses. It's changing paradigms around data laking and data virtualization. It's about bringing in governance. And this is a platform that I can stand on all day and preach about. But understanding the governance across the organization and why that matters, right? And I guess that's what it comes down to at the end of the day is what matters when it comes to transformation. It's not the technologies, it's the reformation of thinking that it comes to bear when making the digital transformation real in an organization. But all the way down to governance and understanding how things are going to be used, why they're going to be used, and how they should be used. And with that comes an entirely new set of skills that most organizations don't have. And as we push into self-service data and analytics as part of that transformation and really pulling in machine learning and machine reasoning, we've got to coalesce all of these things into an enterprise vision to allow us to transform. Doing each one of these individually or doing it in each silo or each business unit in an enterprise is great. You're going to drive some value. But will it be the value that you envision when you go to bed at night? Is it the value that you were promised when that vendor sold you that capability or when your chief data scientist came to you and said, hey, we could do this? Typically not. And why not? Because we wind up in a state of disaster or disillusionment because we haven't aligned technical transformation and cultural transformation to business value and organizational strategy. Technology winds up taking us to a data swamp, right? Data just shows up. It's not governed. It's not well managed. It's not well mastered. It's incomplete. Sometimes it even becomes unusable. And then there's a complete disillusionment from leadership about what they can do or should do. There's people. There's a people become disillusioned. They wind up with information overload because they're being presented with raw data and raw analysis that sometimes is inconsistent. There's a misunderstanding or misinterpretation around how things are being presented, around how data is being mined and fed to decision makers, which leads to misunderstanding, which leads to bad decisions, which is the antithesis of what we want when we talk about digital transformation. And leadership becomes frustrated, disappointed, and disillusioned. And because they're making bad decisions, because they are frustrated with the amount of money that they've tried to invest and the inability to achieve the vision at an enterprise level that they've laid forth, we wind up with reformation after reformation after reformation. Now, it could be small scale, it could be large scale, but why? Why does this happen in organizations? Even some of the best organizations, the most put together organizations on the planet, it's because the fundamentals are still wrong. When we talk about the fundamentals, we talk about literacy, we talk about translation, and we talk about value generation. And when it comes to literacy, we haven't done a good job at the enterprise level of generating common knowledge and standards and exposure and processes around data and analytics that help us drive those data-driven decisions. And without that literacy, without someone or something to help guide leaders and guide organizations in these practices, we can lay out all the technology in the world, bring the best algorithms, bring the best data science to bear, and still struggle to transform an organization to best compete in this part of the century. When it comes to translation, technologists are fantastic. I'm a technologist, but I've had to learn how to translate those technical insights into business outcomes, how to transition projects into portfolios, and scale from really cool science project to really fantastic outcomes for the enterprise by driving usable and useful knowledge. A lot of times in my experience, I've led teams and worked with organizations where people have asked, not should we do something, but can we do something? And I know that's backwards a little bit from the saying, but hear me out. What we should be asking is, should we be doing this? What business value does it drive? What insights help the business? Yeah, it may be really cool. It may be really sexy, but does it matter to the organization? And I know this hurts from a technologist perspective, but it's something that we've got to get right as we start translating technical astuteness into business value. And part of that translation is consistency. And it's consistency in the expert interpretation of what the data scientists, the data analysts and data engineers, and the subject matter experts who are in the trenches involved with the algorithms and doing really great work, and making that known usefully and usably to leadership. And it all boils down to value generation. Have we garnered strategic alignment from the technology we're putting in place, from the culture we're reforming, to the processes that we're putting involved? Are we driving operational efficiencies, right? Every time I've put in a new system or put in a new technology or new capability, it's been all about understanding what the cost-benefit ratio is. And if we're not driving savings or driving value generation or cost avoidance, it's not worth putting in. So even at the beginning of the day, beginning of the process, we've got to talk about translation between the technical what and the business why. And in order to get there, we've got to fundamentally correct these problems so that we can best put in play what the business needs, what the business cares about, and how the organization can thrive. And at the core of that is the translator. So I told you we were going to take a little circuitous route. But the translator is the missing link in most organizations. I just was reading a stat that says even large organizations, 68% or so, have no idea, no concept, no plans for bringing translators to the mix. Now, the data translator, I'd even go broader. The technology translator is one that is going to be absolutely critical for the success of any enterprise organization. These are people who have technical knowledge in data analytics and infrastructure. They understand what's going on They're not necessarily PhDs in machine learning or NLP. They're not necessarily, computer science experts. They're not computer engineers. They're not network engineers, but they understand enough of the technical capabilities and limitations to articulate that to the rest of the business and understand what the business values are. They understand the business wants and needs, and they can map between the two to articulate to the business leaders what the technical meaning or the business meaning of a technical purchase, process, change, or evolution is going to mean. And they can also take the business value and translate it the other direction and say, listen, I know this is hard to hear, guys, but what you're doing doesn't meet the so what factor for driving business value for the organization at the organization level. The most important, the hardest skill to learn, and honestly, most would say this is an inherent feature of an individual, is their ability to steer both of those ships. It's a soft skill. It's not a hard skill. It's not an analytical skill. It's not a knowledge skill. This is a soft skill that says, hey, what's the happy medium between art of the possible and art of the capable on the technology side and the strategic outcomes and business value that is trying to be driven on the B side of the house? That translator is always focused on value and is always helping to avoid misinterpretation and the wasting of projects. Now, I probably should have put a poll together before I started into this morning. But I would ask you to sit and think, how many projects as a data scientist, as an analyst, as an engineer, or even as a leader, have you mothballed because there was a poor link to enterprise value? Probably a lot. I know I've seen my fair share, and I've been on both ends of that. Now, how do we find these people? These people may sound like unicorns, frankly, but they can be anybody. They can be executives, leaders, individual contributors. What it takes are the things that I've put up there. It's that technical knowledge. It's the ability to understand business value, then steer both ships. And in steering both ships, it's about storytelling. It's about making the data speak to business value. It's about making the technological architecture talk to business value. It's about making people understand without driving into the weeds the what and the why about the decisioning that's going on. And again, it goes both directions, right? It's making sure that the technical staff understand the why of the business strategy and making sure that the business leaders understand the why and the how that technological strategy links, supports, and optimizes the business strategy. So when do we engage translators? I would posit that you need a good translator all the time, throughout the life cycle. If you're deciding how to do digital transformation, or you're trying to decide whether or not to do an AI project, you should have a translator involved. And again, it doesn't necessarily need to be by title. It needs to be someone who understands what's going on the technology side and what is going on the business side, and be able to link those two things together and back of the envelope calculate what is the value that's being driven, so that the organizations that are building those capabilities and building those models are not orthogonal to the business. They should be part of the planning life cycle. They should be part of the architecture and design of the capability and of the execution. They should be part of the procurement, right? Oftentimes I've seen vendors come in and pitch an absolutely brilliant sounding capability, and the technologists are all hot and bothered by it. But when it comes to delivering business value, the right questions weren't asked during procurement because the organization was caught up in the bright, shiny lights or the promises of the vendor. But I've also seen where a good business translator can walk in and say, how do you address this value generation? How do you address these objectives? How do you address these use cases that are critical from the business perspective? And it changes the entire direction and the entire success of projects that become enterprise portfolio or enterprise products that help drive decisions. As part of implementation, right? Everybody's part of the digital transformation is really being agile and iterative and incremental. So too should the translator be involved in implementation, because the translator can look at the implementation and say, we need to course correct. We need to nudge this process. We need to nudge this technology to better get us toward our outcomes, and really measure and define those KPIs that we talked about earlier so that the organization as a whole can assess how they're doing when it comes to transformation, when it comes to training, right? One of the biggest problems is misinformation and misinterpretation, especially around data and analytics. One of the things that best increases literacy is training from a translator. Getting people to understand iconography and colors and what the graphs that they're looking at mean and keeping that consistent is one of the best things to bridge the gap between the technical insight and the business outcome. And then when it comes to operations, as people are making those decisions, whether it's M&A, whether it's divestiture, whether it's reorganizing internal business units and business people and processes, the translator should be there. So throughout the entire life cycle, those people need to be involved. They need to be a part of the discussion and really need to focus and drive both sides, both ships, towards one another. And how does that manifest? Well, I don't know how many of you honestly look at the business side of the house and go, what are you guys doing? You're going in this direction. We don't understand it. We're going in that direction from a technology and from a data perspective. We need to bring in then that person who understands those capabilities and limitations. Those translators, when you pull them together, you can now align the business and the technologists through the translators. And this alignment is what is going to propel and empower data-driven decisioning and, frankly, digital transformation as businesses large and small move from where they were a decade ago to where they're going to be in another decade. So bringing it all home, trying to keep us on schedule this morning. These translators are critical to success. And again, it's not just data translation. It's not just AI translation. It's not just analytics translation, but it's the enterprise translation between technology and business value. And it's all about empowering both sides of the house. And those translators, they can be anybody, but they've got to have the technical and business acumen. They've got to be able to understand value generation. They can be executives or associates. But at the end of the day, they need to be well-placed and well-trusted. And while trust is garnered, a good translator can tell the right story that appeases and steers and nudges both sides of the house when it comes to understanding data, understanding technology, and the digital landscape and how that can transform and produce value for the enterprise as a whole. And I thank you so much for your time and attention this morning. I hope you have a fantastic rest of the conference and enjoy all of the speakers that are here today to inform and enlighten and engage with you. And thank you all so very much for your time and attention.